What is up, party people? Welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That guy over there is Ryan Roberts, and we're here to kind of kick off game week. It's shortened in a lot of ways. We had Christmas yesterday, obviously Monday. Now today's Tuesday, and then the game is Friday, not Saturday. So everything is kind of compressed. But we're gonna take you through, Oregon State, kind of a first look at Oregon State. I know Brian has a quick article over there at irishbreakdown.com about Oregon State, kind of their, statistical leaders and, some things like that. But we're gonna roll through it. We're gonna talk about what this means for Notre Dame, like what's at stake for Notre Dame, and then we're gonna talk more specifically about Oregon State. But before we do, Ryan Roberts, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, welcome back to work. I mean, see, you were a teacher for a while, so you understand. My thought process right now is like, I don't give a crap about anything. Like, it is Christmas break. Not to worry about anything. Just in absolute chill mode this morning. Went out and shagged for my son when he did his little kicking thing today. And then Brian's like, hey, man, I need you to be on the show. I don't feel good. I'm like, all right, we'll feel better, buddy. And I got you. So here we are doing the 1 o'clock show. So, Ryan, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm pretty good, Vince. Pretty good. Christmas was nice, a little hectic as it always is. I'm sure that you can understand that one, but it was extra hectic actually this morning because my wife was like, you know what? I'm going to keep both girls home from daycare today. And I was like, okay, well, I still got 3 articles done this morning, man. Somehow, I don't know how I did it, but hey, we're working, man. We're working here. I guess.
I'm impressed. My wife currently has the female contingent out at the mall with the gift cards and the whole. Getting
those after Christmas deals.
Yeah, man.
Right? Getting those things happening. Yeah.
And it's funny. She's like, we're going to go to the mall. We're going to try stuff on. And then we're going to come home. And we're going to order it online because that's where the deals are. I was like, all right, whatever.
Makes sense. Here.
Yeah. That'd be great.
I personally am not going to be shopping for like the next 6 months or so. Like, I'm good, man. I don't need any of that stuff right now. Don't need
I have like a personal thing where like I don't go shopping until after school's out. Well, school got out at 3:30 on Friday. So I did all of my shopping for my wife on Saturday, which I thought was pretty good because it wasn't Christmas Eve. So I did pretty good. That's the way I look at it.
That's great.
But
see, I've transitioned fully to online shopping for the most part. So I don't go out to, well, actually I did have to go out to a couple. So I made another mistake, and I know we're going to get to Oregon State here. I'm sorry for this.
Of course we are.
Tangent, but I took my 3-year-old, well, she's going to be 3 in January, my 2 and whatever month old daughter out to Rally House on like 2 days before Christmas because I wanted to get my wife, because I'm taking her to a Sixers game. So I wanted to get her like a Sixers beanie and some earrings and stuff. We went out there, and my daughter for about 40 minutes was like, Daddy, I'm just going to drag you around this store. We're going to play hide and seek. And that was the worst decision I've ever made in my life. So yes, fully online from now on, fully online.
Dude, I have taken all 5 kids out shopping for my wife in the past, and it's
you are a braver man than I am, Vince. You're a braver man than I am.
Not kidding. All right. Anyway, hey, we got some football to talk about. We can leave our families behind for a moment, but we've got a bowl game, and it's not the sexiest bowl game in the world, but it is a bowl game. It's the Sun Bowl, the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl. The pictures were hilarious. To me, of the team getting off the plane and posing with Tony the Tiger, and I mean that was cool. And then the sombrero goes firmly on the head of Marcus Freeman, which I thought was fantastic as well. So obviously the team is down in El Paso. They've had a few practices. They're practicing. I Google mapped the location of their practices, and it is a full-fledged like oval stadium, right? In the middle of the desert. Like there's no green anywhere. Which I thought was very interesting. But they're in the desert. They're in El Paso, Texas. They're doing their thing. And I believe Brian's going to be flying out there either today or tomorrow to join the craziness down there. And then they're kicking off at 2 o'clock on Friday, 2 o'clock Eastern time, that is. I believe that's a noon kickoff local time if you're going down to El Paso. So enjoy that, everybody. But we've got a matchup to talk about and what's at stake for Notre Dame. And the 2 Deep was released. I believe, what was it? Christmas Eve is when that email came out. Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yep.
And you want to talk about some new names donning the 2 Deep, especially offensively, Ryan. a lot of new faces that we're going to see on Friday, which is great. I mean, it is what it is. We've got 2 ranked teams here for Notre Dame and Oregon State. So, in your opinion, first thing that comes to mind, what's at stake for Notre Dame?
It's a great question because I think that for me, and we'll get obviously more into the Oregon State side of things when we're breaking them down in a little bit here. But I mean, Oregon State also has a lot of new names on their depth chart,
Yes, they
right?
do.
Like guys that we you know the name, but still, there's obviously been some guys that have already opted out for various reasons, whether it is injury related, whether it's NFL draft related, and so on and so forth. I mean, the biggest thing for me, Vince, is you mentioned that you were a teacher, and I know you've now moved up to a higher up role. I was also a teacher. I taught math, and I want to do some quick, easy math for the folks. So this is some early childhood math.
Love
okay,
it. Love it.
There's a thing called greater than, less than, or equal to in math.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The most basic principle I can explain to you here on why is this important for Notre Dame is 10 is greater than 9, right? Like that is ultimately
100%.
That's it. Because Vince, I'll say this: 9 wins in Notre Dame standards is not good enough just in a general vacuum. 10 in a general vacuum is also not good enough for Notre Dame. But the 10 looks a whole lot better to next year's team, the players that are returning, the national perception, and the recruits coming in. 10 looks a whole lot better than a single-digit win column, right? That looks a whole lot better. You can sell it a lot easier.
Oh, yeah.
First 10-win season under Marcus Freeman's tutelage as the head coach at the University of Notre Dame. So I think the basic principle here is that you want to get to that 10th win because it's about building, right? And the build that you have here is that 9-4 first year under Marcus Freeman, not good enough for great. If you're able to get to 10-3, still not good enough, but at least you improved because you're 10-3 versus 9-4 against a better schedule than what you played in 2022 as well. So I think that you could still come out of the season and say, hey, we're still not there, but ultimately we are building, right? It was better than it was in 2022. 2023 was better. Now, does it still need to get better? For sure. But I think just the basic conversation to start is that 10 looks a whole lot better than 9, and it means that you improved upon your record from a year ago. Just, generally speaking.
100%. And yeah, some people would look at this as a lipstick on a pig scenario, that you need to go to the Sun Bowl to get your 10th win. And, one of those 10 wins was against an FCS opponent. Yep, that's true. But at the end of the day, when you're looking back, right? Look, this was not the season that any of us envisioned. I mean, we all said that, 10 wins in the regular season was the floor for this team, and they did not meet that floor. They're in the basement of that floor. I mean, of that scenario, and so they need this bowl win to get to that 10-win plateau. And then when the further away we get from this season, depending on what happens in 24 and what happens in 25 and all of that, you're going to look back at 23 and exactly like Ryan said, you're going to say, look, there was the first 10-win season under Marcus Freeman. It was a clear step in the right direction after year 1. They had 9 wins, and that included a bowl win. Now they're going to get to 10 wins, which includes a bowl win. They're not going to be like, well, that 10 wins included Tennessee State, and that 10 wins included this, that, and the other. It's not going to happen. They're going to look at the total, and it's going to be 10 wins. And we're not – I want everybody to understand this. We're not saying that the regular season went the way it was supposed to go. Like, at all. That is not what we're saying. We are not putting on the rose-colored glasses and be like, this season was a success. Like that. It's not what we're saying at all. We're all disappointed.
It can be a stepping stone to success, though, right? Like they could build upon. Vince, I think regardless, because I think people can have a difference of opinion of what this season meant for Notre Dame as far as the success level. I agree. You can't quantify it fully as a success because anything short of making the playoffs, contending for a national championship, that is not a success in the Notre Dame lore. It's not. But I think that the one thing we can all agree on, no matter what side of the coin you are, as far as, this coaching staff is heading in the right direction, or I don't believe in it, or whatever layer that you kind of sit on, or what step you sit on there, I think we still agree, though, is that the team was much better in 2023 than it was in 2022. I wholeheartedly believe that. I mean, offensively, you had an uptick of 8 points per game against a better overall schedule, in my opinion. The offense was better in general. The defense was very improved. I think they went down like 5 points per game this season. Notre Dame had one of the best defenses in college football from a year ago. And if you were able to cap it off with 10 wins and say, hey, it was better, it is building in the right direction, which I think most people can agree that it's better at least than it was in year one under Marcus Freeman, then you get kind of excited because what is this game really, Vince? Like what does bowl season become outside of the playoff games, right? What does it become? It's become a tune-up for next season, right? This is where all the young cats that are going to be counted upon a whole lot more in 2024, it's when they start really taking those steps to being that guy. This is a first step in that process a little bit because for the most part, the players we're going to see on Friday, outside of DJ Brown and Javonte Jean-Baptiste, I'm trying to think if there's anybody offensively that we're not expecting back, and I don't believe so, right? Like that is the two guys that are exhausting eligibility for sure. Spencer Schrader, I guess, if you want to throw him in there, Michael Vincent, like a couple specialists. But outside of those couple names, everyone in theory, barring any, decisions to transfer in the offseason or whatever, they are all back, right? Like we're going to get our first taste of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price as the lead backs at Notre Dame. Right. You're going to see defensively Benjamin Morrison making plays, Howard Cross making plays, Riley Mills making plays. All those kids, and I forgot to mention J.D. Bertrand is one of the other guys that's going to be out after the season as well. Xavier Watts hopefully returning for another season in 2024. So you are going to get your first taste of what 2024 version of Notre Dame is going to look like because for the large part, the majority of the football players that you're going to see on Friday are going to be a part of the equation in 2024. So I think it's really just kind of a little glimpse into the future, because unfortunately bowl season is not quite how I remember it. It wasn't right. I used to love bowl season, man.
Oh my gosh.
It's not the same anymore, but it's still important for programs because this is where you get Jeremiah Love some reps. This is where you get the quarterback position some reps. Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchie for the future. This is where you get some of the young wide receivers. Again, Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison. This is where you get Charles Jagasaw, his first start at left tackle in a Notre Dame uniform. This is where the foundation is started to build for 2024. So I think that's kind of gets you a little bit of excitement as a Notre Dame fan to see what the next wave of Notre Dame greats could potentially look like in 2024.
Well, and it's always been important, to make a bowl game, to get those extra practices, and all that. And we always talked about, let's say there's 15 practices, 12 of those you're preparing for the other team, but like 3 of those are like an underclassmen practice where they give kind of those veterans the day off. It's even more so that now than ever before because a decent number of those veterans are either opting out or they've transferred or whatever. And so you're using every one of those practices, not only to get ready for your opponent specifically, but to get your team ready because you've got guys playing next to each other that have never played next to each other in a ball game before. I mean, Charles Jagasaw has never been a left tackle at Notre Dame. I mean, he just never has. And
I mean, literally during his freshman year, Vince, he was going back and forth between tackle and guard throughout the year. So you're right. Like this is his first game of a cemented. This is where you're going to play. Is the type of situation for sure.
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, it's absolutely huge. And say what you want. I mean, I know there's a lot of people out there that love them some Steve Angeli. Well, this is his opportunity to really show up and show out. And he's going to get the first swing at the quarterback competition, right, in the spring. Now, we don't need to go down that road, but this is a great opportunity for Steve Angeli to show what he's made of for an entire football game, or at least as long as the football game is a football game, right? And it's a great opportunity for him. It's a great opportunity for Jalen Sneed, for example, because he's going to get a lot more playing time in this game than he's gotten all season. Man. That's exactly right. And so, and go down the list. I mean, we don't have to break down every single guy that's going to have an opportunity, but there's a bunch. There's a bunch. Yep. Now, I don't know how you could possibly forget that this is potentially Matt Salerno's last game in a Notre Dame uniform. Come on, man. It's an offensive
potentially
guy.
Yes. I'm sorry. Because where Notre Dame is, I mean, they have 6 healthy receivers, right? So Matt Salerno is going to have to play. I mean, they have literally 2 deep. That's all they have in this game.
And he's donning number 4. He's donning number 4, by the way. I don't know if anybody noticed that on the depth chart that was released by Notre Dame. I'm kind of obsessed with that kind of nonsense about the numbers and the things like that, but he's listed as number 4. So
I'm just thankful, and I don't know what number 29 means to Matt Salerno, but having a wide receiver wear 29 all due respect to Kevin Stepherson, is not the best look in the world. So yes, I think number 4 is definitely an improvement over number 29.
Completely agree.
Number 4 was who was Chris Tyree was number 4, right?
Chris Tyree, yeah, Chris
Yeah,
Tyree,
yeah.
and unfortunately, he will not be playing with the game. So,
Yep.
So yeah, Chris Salerno or Matt Salerno. Wow, Matt Salerno is going to be number 4, and yeah, so that'll be the only different number I think that I noticed on the 2 deep moving forward. But still, a lot of fun, a lot of excitement for this game. I mean, this is like people are talking about how it's an exhibition game. Kind of. Yes, it is kind of.
Sure.
But
yeah,
all bowl games are exhibition games unless you're playing for a national championship. So, I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. But we have the opportunity now to see what this team could potentially look like in the future moving forward. And I think that part is exciting to me. If it was just, look, let's be honest. In my opinion, if Notre Dame was full strength, even if Oregon State was full strength, I like Notre Dame in this game a lot, right? I think Notre Dame would boat race Oregon State. Now there's a lot of question marks. Like, I think Notre Dame's still a 10-point favorite last time I looked, but there's a lot of question marks. The only non-question mark is the defense for Notre Dame. Like, I'm really excited to see the defense go up against whatever Oregon State's going to throw out there offensively. I'm excited to see what this defense can do. I'm just saying, like, whatever the over-under is, take the under because, I don't think there's going to be a ton of points scored on the Oregon State side of things.
Man, because it's very interesting because I always love the work Brian does with these statistics, right, Vince, where he kind of breaks down, scoring offense and yards per play and third down offense. And I'm literally looking at the list that he had posted, right? And it's like, offensively on paper, Oregon State was a pretty good team this year. They averaged over nearly 34 points a game, 33.8 points a game, which was 26th ranked in the country. They were 18th overall, 18th overall with 6.6 yards per play. Good rushing offense this year, 33rd in the country, over 180 yards a game. They were efficient passing offense, yards per completion, over 14 per completion, 8.4 yards per attempt, which was good for 23rd nationally. And that's awesome, right? Like, you look at that and you're like, Notre Dame might have their hands full with an Oregon State offense, but then
their red zone offense too, I want to point out, 97.6% in the red zone. Okay. Like, that's really freaking good.
Number 2 in the country, man.
Yeah.
And so, like, on paper, it's funny because you look at these numbers and you have to talk about them because that is what the 2023 Oregon State team has been. But unfortunately, with where we are in this crazy transfer portal world and early opt-out world, that Oregon State team that put up those numbers, that's not the Beavers anymore. It's just not who they are, right? Because one, I mean, the biggest conversation we can have, Vince, is they don't have the same head coach. I mean, if we're starting just from the top up, right? I mean, they don't have Jonathan Smith. He's over at Michigan State now. They also don't have their 2 top quarterbacks anymore. Literally, DJ Uyunglele is still in the portal after transferring from Clemson his 1 year. And I mean, honestly, DJ was pretty good his 1 year at Oregon State.
I
wasn't
thought
fantastic.
He had a resurgence, I would say. I mean, he was heading in the wrong direction down at Clemson. He was about to get benched, and so he left, which is probably smart, and he had a good year.
I thought he was very efficient this year for Oregon State. Again, not fantastic, but I mean, that yards per play, yards per completion numbers, I think that shows that he brought what Oregon State needed him to bring, and that was explosive passing attempts, right? Because he has a stronger arm, obviously, than what they've had this past couple years with the Gustafson kid who's going to be starting for them in the bowl game last year and Chance Nolan and like those types of guys. He's obviously more talented than that. But he's in the portal. Aiden Childs, who is a really talented true freshman for them, he entered the portal and he's going to Michigan State with Jonathan Smith. So they're down to their 3rd string quarterback. Running back wise, Damian Martinez is not slated to play. They're going to have Deshaun Fenwick, who is a good running back in his own right. Like, he's not Damian Martinez in my opinion, but he's a very efficient running back. Strong kid, 6'2", 230 plus pounds. He's a good college running back, man. Like, he's a guy that you have to worry about. And they do still have Silas Bolden, who was their most explosive pass game weapon at wide receiver this year. Lost Jack Velling, though, who was in the transfer portal as well. I think he picked somewhere, but he was a really good tight end for the Beavers. But I think the biggest loss, if I had to like quantify what the biggest loss is, because DJU is a good player, right? But a loss of him, I think that with how Oregon State functions, because they are a running football team, I still think that you can lose a DJ Uyunglele and still be okay, right? Like you can still do that. The biggest losses on this team, though, is during the season, Vince. I don't know how much Oregon State you were watching before this week, obviously, before the last couple weeks.
All right.
But they had one of the best offensive lines in college football. They really did, because they had 3 pillars of that offensive line. The 3 most important positions when you talk about offensive line is the left tackle, right tackle, and center. Those are it, right? That's how it's built. 2 out of 3 of those players is not playing in this football game. Talise Fuaga, the right tackle, who's potentially a first-round pick in the 2024 NFL draft, he's not playing. Joshua Gray, their very good multi-year starter at left tackle, who had like 3rd-round preseason grades by a lot of teams, he's not going to play. The one lone guy that will play is Jake Levengood at center, who's a good center. I mean, he's one of the better centers, more consistent centers in all of college football. So that's good that they'll have him at least. But if we're talking about the biggest advantage Notre Dame should have in this game, they should have the advantage up front. Like, that's the biggest thing. As far as Oregon State's offensive line, when fully healthy and fully intact, is a really good unit. Without Joshua Gray at left tackle, without Talise Fuaga, who's an absolute monster at right tackle, it just isn't the same offensive line. At least it's not right now. Maybe it will be eventually with the guys that are filling in. I don't know them personally. I haven't watched them play. But without those guys, in the sense of also combined with not having your starting quarterback, backup, and your best player offensively, in my opinion, and Damian Martinez out for the game as well, this is a Oregon State offense that is in disarray right now, man. Like, it is going to. If Notre Dame fans think that Notre Dame's offense is going to look different, guys, I guarantee you it can be worse. And it's going to be worse. The very team that you're playing in the Sun Bowl, it's going to be worse.
Yeah, no, and that's going to be the interesting part, right? When I heard that both of their tackles were out, Notre Dame is playing the same way. Both of their tackles are out too. I get that. The difference is that the drop off of Notre Dame's tackles potentially to Oregon State's backup tackles, I think, is a little bit different. I will lead the analysis to you on that one, but that's how I feel when watching this team. And then, Notre Dame's best running back is out. Oregon State's best running back is out.
Yes.
Oregon State's down to a backup quarterback, but they're down to their 3rd string. Now, the difference here also is this 3rd string quarterback does have a lot of experience from 2022. So technically he's got more experience than Steve Angeli.
I think he actually had a pretty good record too as Oregon State's quarterback in 2022, because I mean, they were a 10-win team that year. They won double-digit games that season. I just think the difference though, Vince, is like Oregon State, like, yeah, they might have consistency at quarterback, a guy that's played a few games, but they've lost a lot around him, right? Like, it's not the same. It's just not the same offense without the 2 tackles, without the running back, without the tight end. Like, it's just going to look a whole lot different. Could the quarterback keep it afloat a little bit better than maybe a freshman quarterback who's never played, or a kid making his first career start? For sure. I mean, I think we could easily say that. But I'll say this, is that Notre Dame defensively is going to have a lot of their best players play in this game. Like, you're not going to have Cam Hartz. You're not going to have Maris Loifau, for instance, but you're going to have the 2 defensive tackles, Riley Mills, Howard Cross. You're going to have J.D. Bertrand. You're going to have Xavier Watts. You're going to have Benjamin Morrison. Notre Dame clearly has the advantage there, right? Like, on paper, Notre Dame should be able to beat up the Oregon State offense. Will that happen? We'll see, right? But I think that when you talk about Al Golden still calling the defense, when you talk about having multiple of your best players defensively, I think Notre Dame should be able to handle this offense, because it's a team that's in transition quite literally, because they're going to have a new coaching staff coming in.
Yeah.
Or at least a new head coach coming in. I know he was already on the staff previously, but still, there's going to be a transition that is quickly happening here.
Yeah, no, it's going to be, I think the coaching moves have made things even more interesting from an Oregon State standpoint, right? I mean, obviously, look, this is the domino effect of college coaching, right? So you've got the head coach, he's gone to Michigan State. So that obviously changes the dynamic, but the guy that you named as the head coach moving forward, the defensive coordinator,
Trent Bray,
is not going to coach in this game. That's
weird,
wild to me, Ryan.
It's weird. It's very strange. Yeah.
That makes no sense to me. They're like, well, we want him to focus on recruiting. You can't take an afternoon off to like coach a game. Like, I don't know. That just seems very odd to me that he's not going to coach in this game when a lot of the players are guys that he's going to coach, and you would think that they would want him around and want him coaching this game. But so they're going to have an interim head coach. They've got an interim defensive coordinator because the defensive coordinator, the new head coach, is not going to participate. Offensive coordinator, is he going to be around?
I'm not sure about that, actually.
You know what I mean? Sure. So it's just like, I know a lot of these coaches are also going to be transitioning to Michigan State. So, I mean, there's a lot of that going on, but keeping the defensive coordinator as the head coach is probably going to be a 50-50 split. Some of those guys are going to stay. Some of those guys are going to go. So the coaching carousel of things, I think, makes this game very, very interesting. From an on the field standpoint, what are we going to see? Are we going to see we're going to see some wrinkles because that's what you see in bowl games, especially with all the new personnel that you're going to see. But to me, the coaching thing is the biggest difference in this game because Notre Dame's coaching staff, Jared Parker's gone, obviously. Sure. So you've got Gino Guidugli as the interim offensive coordinator. He's got experience as an offensive coordinator.
He does.
And you've got Mike Brown coming in as a wide receivers coach, but he's had the entire bowl prep to coach these guys.
You also have for the transition of a first, for Gino Guidugli calling the offense for the Sun Bowl is also that you have Joe Rudolph on the staff, who has also called offenses in the past as far as being an OC while he was at Wisconsin. So you'll be able to lean on both those guys. So I think
for sure,
a good game plan potentially. Yeah,
but just a lot more stability from the coaching standpoint for Notre Dame than you have for Oregon State. And, and Mike Denbrock, I'm sure, is going to be around. Is he going to be at the actual Sun Bowl? I don't know the answer to that question. It's a hop, skip, and a jump, frankly, from Louisiana. So, I mean, he definitely could be there as he's transitioning back to South Bend. I think he could probably make that jaunt. And if I'm him, I haven't been at Notre Dame in a while. I want to see these guys in person. Like that.
Sure.
That would be me. Sure. If I'm Mike Denbrock, I want to be there in person.
Well, it's kind of like self-scouting a little bit, right? Because what do you do when you're a coach in a new place for the first time, or coming back to a new place in Coach Denbrock's situation? He's going to go to the film and he's going to watch all right, these guys are who I have. These guys are coming back. This is what the cupboard is now, and then we'll see what we can add to it, obviously. So, yeah, you're 100%. I think seeing a team in person is also a big advantage for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that the stability thing is a big thing that you're hitting on, Vince, because I agree completely, because it's also comparative to what Oregon State has right now with coaching stability is not there. You mentioned Coach Bray is not slated to coach in this football game. You lose Jonathan Smith, obviously, as the head coach. You have a lot of transition of very important things offensively from DJ Uyunglele, starting offensive tackles, running back not being able to play, tight end Jack Velling, who I just remembered is actually at Michigan State as well. So he followed Coach Smith as well in that regard. And if I asked you, though, like what is the best parts of what Oregon State has been offensively this year? And you mentioned one of them already. No, and it's literally called red zone efficiency offense because they just score when they get in the red zone.
Right.
They've been an efficient offense for Oregon State this year. Yeah. Everything they do, nothing is like crazy exotic or consistently explosive. What they are, though, is they average a good yards per carry average, number 20 in the country, 5.1 as a team. And again, college stats are with losses attached to that, right? It's with sacks and such. So 5.1 yards a carry is a really good number. They also have a really high yards per attempt average, yards per completion average. They are very efficient in those regards. They also don't turn the ball over a ton. They're they're 14th in the country for fewest amount of turnovers. So they don't turn the ball over a ton either. So we're talking about yards per play, efficiency in the red zone, not turning the football over. That's how Oregon State has been built under Jonathan Smith, to not kill yourself, to not hurt yourself, be an efficient offense. And what's the worst part about transition? That cuts efficiency, right? We don't have a quarterback. We don't have the guy calling plays. We don't have the head coach. We don't have our two offensive tackles. It's almost inconceivable to believe that Oregon State will be as efficient of a offense as they've been this season because they have a lot going against them that will cut that efficiency, unfortunately, for them.
Oh, absolutely. When that much leadership is not around anymore and you're hearing a different voice. And look, a different voice can be a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It could be a good thing. But in this, truncated amount of time, having all these new voices, I don't think is a good thing personally. I don't think that that's a good thing for the bowl game. That could be a good thing moving forward into next year. Excuse me, and all of that type of deal. But it is a huge amount of inconsistency moving forward for Oregon State, and we'll see if that affects them. In this game again, lots of new faces and things like that. So there's going to be that. And you kind of went over offensively what this team. I do believe, just looking at the stats for the quarterback, that is his stats from last year, right? Ben Gulbranson. 121 out of 194 for 62.4%. Okay, that's pretty decent, right? 1,400 yards, but he had 9 touchdowns and 5 picks.
Yeah,
that's not a lot of explosive plays there. That stat line screams to me, and I haven't watched a lot of 22 film, but that stat line screams to me game manager.
Yes,
that just tells me they're going to take what the defense gives them. They're going to slowly, methodically move the ball down the field. They're not going to take a lot of big chances, things of that nature. And then you add into the fact that he's got all these new pieces around him, 2 new offensive tackles. Like, that's their offense to me. It's going to be a run heavy. The quarterback's not going to screw it up for them. Kind of an offense that we're going to see on Friday.
It's a good one for Gulbranson because if you remember, Vince, their starting quarterback to begin last year was actually Chance Nolan, who had started the previous year. And Chance was pretty talented, but Chance Nolan, I believe when he got benched, had more interceptions than touchdowns. He was not an efficient player at all in 2022. So they benched him for Gulbranson, who is a whole lot more efficient in the sense of he's a game manager. He is in the most polite sense of the word.
Right.
And that's
it's not a that's not I do want to make that very clear. Like, I'm not dissing the kid. Like, if I'm a head coach, I want a kid who's not going to turn the ball over. And if that means things aren't going to be quite as flashy and as an exciting, okay, we're not going to turn the ball over.
Right. And which is perfect for a backup quarterback, Vince.
Right.
It really is.
Absolutely.
Because when that kid comes in the game, he can keep you on schedule and he's not going to kill you. There was also a reason why they went for DJ Uiagalelei in the portal.
Sure.
They wanted to create more explosives. They wanted to create more big plays, which DJ was able to do at a decent rates this year. Like, again, 14.4 yards per completion was 12th in all of college football. Yards per attempt, 8.4 passing wise was 23rd in college football. Like, they were a pretty explosive passing attack for the most part. They created some big plays. Gulbranson's not the same type of dude. Like, he doesn't have DJ Uiagalelei's arm strength, doesn't have Aiden Child's arm strength. Like, they're just not going to be able to create those big explosive plays with him. But he is the perfect player in the sense of you're down a couple quarterbacks, maybe there's an injury at the position, whatever. He can come in and he can keep you afloat. Yes. I think the bigger, because I don't even you heard me in the beginning, Vince. What did I say was the biggest detriment to this team? It wasn't the quarterback position. It's the offensive line being a little bit in transition and disarray. For me, that on paper is my biggest worry as a Oregon State fan or supporter, is that you're down your 2 best offensive linemen in this game. One that's probably going to go in the first round. That's where the issue comes for me. Because I have a bad feeling, a bad feeling for Oregon State fans, a good feeling for Notre Dame fans, is that when you're getting pressed into some situations where, like, hey, maybe more has to be on Gulbranson's shoulders than normally would be, and for what his style is, that's not good for Oregon State because that's not how they operate. That's not how they want him to operate. They want him to throw about 20 passes against Notre Dame, and you run the ball about 40-something times, and you win the football game because you were able to just be efficient.
Right.
Now, if Notre Dame's able to stop the run game and force Gulbranson into being more than what he is, that's where you get into trouble. That's where some interceptions might happen, some sack fumbles, some bad sacks. Negatives. That's where that stuff could happen. So I don't even think that he's a detriment to the team. I just think that he is a very solid player. And when you're a solid player, you need other things around you to be very good. That's what game manager, that's what system player really is, in my opinion.
Right. And as far as like matchups and things of that nature, I mean, I think Oregon State's going to want to be a run first team in this game. And so, what does that mean for Notre Dame and having pretty much their entire defense intact? Outside of a couple of guys, right? And so what does that look like? Are they going to load the box and just prevent Oregon State from running the football, force Gulbranson to throw it and beat them? I think that's a pretty solid game plan, frankly, especially with the secondary that Notre Dame is going to employ in this game, right? I mean, yes, Gray is going to be a new starter. I have a lot of faith in him and what he's going to be able to do. And of course, you've got Benjamin Morrison on the other side and Xavier Watts in the back. I mean, go ahead and put those guys on an island, as far as I'm concerned, and force them to throw the football. I think that's a pretty sound game plan defensively. We'll see what Al Golden wants to do. It's not going to be that simple. Obviously,
Sure.
he's gonna throw some different things at this kid and see what he can do and all of that. I mean, Notre Dame's been very successful defensively this season, but with all of the guys that are going to be playing in this game defensively, I have a very hard time seeing Oregon State really pushing the ball down the field in an explosive manner. Maybe they put together a drive where it's kind of a dink and dunk, run the football, that type of deal. But if they can't get the running game going, it could be a long day offensively for Oregon State.
Oh, it definitely can. I think for me, I don't know how Coach Golden is exactly going to enact this defensive game plan, Vince. But for me,
Yeah.
I would think that in the back ends, you would be a little bit maybe softer from a coverage perspective. Just let them have some easy stuff if they want it. You're going to eventually force them into trying to create some big plays, because I do agree with you. And this is in Al Golden's. This is in his repertoire here. Is
Right.
that he wants to be aggressive up front, right? Like he wants to blitz a ton. He wants to try to create negatives. He wants to try to affect the quarterback with extra numbers. And I think that this is a game that makes a lot of sense for that, right? Like you want to get to Deshaun Fenwick as a running back in the backfield, because he's a big kid, 6'2", 234 pounds. Like he can run a little bit. If you're able to get him really kind of slowed up, and then you're also able to just enact enough pressure to make the quarterback make a couple bad decisions and get on the ground occasionally, I think that is the best scenario that you can be at Notre Dame, because this game, and we'll talk about keys to victory, obviously, later in the week before the game, but Notre Dame has a chance, in my opinion, based upon just the simple fact that you have a veteran defensive line, a lot of experience going up against a offensive line and a little bit of transition. You have a chance to win the game up front and never let this one get it really close, right? So you're going to have Christian Gray, you're going to have Jaden Mickey filling in for Cam Hart, and I think that there's going to be a couple opportunities defensively for one of those corners, whether it's Gray in the game, whether it's Jaden Mickey in the game, to make a play, right? To make an interception, big pass breakup, whatever it is. I think that you definitely need to take advantage of Oregon State having a little bit of transition up front, though, because that's where most games are won in general. And I think that Notre Dame clearly has the advantage up front in this game defensively.
With Thomas Harper out, which I think was a bit of a surprise, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I know you're closer to the situation than I am. But he just announced, I think yesterday or the day before, that he's going to, go to the draft and all that. So he's not going to play.
Yep.
And with the Gray situation, Gray or Mickey at corner, right?
Yep.
And with Thomas Harper being out, who do you foresee being kind of that nickel back? Is it going to be Mickey? Is it going to be Clarence Lewis? Is it, what do you see happening over there?
That's a great question. I would think for me, I wouldn't be shocked to see at some points in this football game, and it remains to be seen if we see it, but I would not be shocked if we see a few reps where it is Benjamin Morrison, Christian Gray on the outside, and Jaden Mickey in the slot. I think that they're going to mix and match it a little bit. I think that we'll see some Mickey in the slot, maybe not on a full-time basis, but I believe that we'll see him at some points in this game in the slot. I also think that you'll see Clarence Lewis in the slot. And I think that you might also see Vince, because I don't think that you're worried about Oregon State making a bunch of explosive plays with the transition they're in. You might just see them just run their 4-2-5 base in the 4-3 personnel at times, right? Like you just leave Jalen Snead out there. Maybe bring a safety in to be that guy. Maybe a Don Schuler gets a couple reps there. I'm not 100% sure about that. Sure. But I think when they are a nickel, I believe that you will see Clarence Lewis and Jaden Mickey in this game. And I think you should see that, because I think that inside, Jaden Mickey's athleticism and his physicality would work great at nickel. So I would actually I'd be open to that, man. I really would.
Yeah, no, I would too. And I think that, in my opinion, and I'm sure Jaden Mickey wants to be a starting corner. I mean, I get that. But I think his future at Notre Dame could be a very valuable one at nickel. With the offenses that they're running against, the majority of the time and how that works. Like Thomas Harper was an integral part of this defense as the starting nickel, right? Yes. And he never once went outside. Like, he was the starting nickel the entire time, and he was valuable. to this group. And so I could very easily see Jaden Mickey kind of stepping into that role moving forward if he does, in fact, get beat out or they decide that's the route they want to take, at corner, moving forward. But that's a pretty formidable trio of corners on the field with Gray, Mickey, and Morrison.
I'm a big fan of interchangeability at cornerback, Vince. Like, I love guys that can play outside and in, because what offenses are going to do to you sometimes, if you have a guy that's just a nickel, right, or just an outside corner, they're going to do short motions. They're going to do some stacks at points because they're going to try to get a guy in a position that they're not comfortable in, right? But I think that if you have a opportunity where you have Christian Gray on the outside, Benjamin Morrison, and Jaden Mickey in the slot, Jaden Mickey is clearly comfortable playing outside as well.
Sure.
So if he's able to play both, there might be some situations where, hey, you're in man coverage, you motion out, and now Jaden Mickey becomes the outside corner rather than the slot corner. It's like, you're good. Like, you don't need to panic. You don't need to make these crazy adjustments in a defense because he can play inside and out potentially on the next level. And when you're talking about, hey guys, if you want to talk about, getting a little bit of insight into next year, if that is the plan, then you could see whole drives or maybe most of a game where your three corners on the field are those three players. And if that's the case, good luck losing offenses. I mean, like, look, losing Cam Hart stinks, right? Like, he's a really good player. There's no doubt about it. But if you trade Cam Hart for the interchangeableness of that trio, I think Notre Dame's going to be just fine at corner next year. Like, I think they're going to be very good at corner because that doesn't even count, Chance Tucker or some of the freshmen coming in or like those types of guys, Micah Bell maybe. Like, you're not even talking about those guys because of the interchangeability of having a guy like Jaden Mickey that can potentially do both things. I think Christian Gray could do it too. Like, I think Christian Gray could play inside a little bit. I think Benjamin Morrison, not as much actually Benjamin Morrison, but you still have some interchangeability there that I think can be really valuable with how the game is run today. Teams want to go fast offensively. They want to get guys in bad positions. They want a short motion and just motion across the formation to try to get guys into uncomfortable situations. And if you're able to match that and not panic, because defensively, that's all you're trying to do. You're trying to make adjustments without panicking. That's ultimately what the name of the game is. And if you're able to do that, man, and that's going to be a really good secondary in 2024 potentially.
And we're going to get a sneak peek of that, obviously, on Friday as well. And I think that's part of why I'm really excited to watch this game, right? Yes, this is not the team that we've been following all season. It hasn't been, and that's okay. But there's going to be a lot of fun things to see, a lot of peeks into the future of what this team could be in 24 and then potentially even into 25 with a lot of the young talent. I mean, look at the safety position for Notre Dame. You've got your two starters, obviously, in Brown and Watts, and then the two deep, the second string guys, are both true freshmen, one of which isn't even on scholarship at the moment. Obviously, that will be rectified, I would imagine, moving forward eventually. But, you've got two true freshmen back there backing up at safety, and they could get some playing time in this game too, man. It's exciting. The youth movement is what I'm looking forward to.
I would not be opposed to at some points to finish up the nickel conversation to having a Don Schuler as a big nickel at times when it's a spread offense, but still Oregon State wants to run the football. Having a guy like a Don Schuler to play the alley and to be able to be that force player at times, I'd be down for that, man. So I'd be okay to even have three safeties on the field at times. I want to see a load of a Don Schuler. I want to see a load of Ben Minnick as long as he's healthy and ready to go. Like, I want to see some of those young cats play because, again, we're opening up the possibilities for what next year, while it's, maybe even won't be as good necessarily, it could be more versatile, though, which I think can play into Notre Dame's favor if you use it correctly.
Well, and you wonder why Al Golden is looking at a contract extension, right? I mean, there's just so many parts and pieces to play with at Notre Dame, so many high-level parts and pieces to play with that, you can just be a grandmaster chess guy, and just be moving these pieces around and run the same defense, but with different personnel and different things. I mean, the sky's the limit defensively, and Oregon State is going to be up against it on Friday, going up against this defense. I mean, I just, they're bringing a knife to a gunfight, in my opinion, when we're talking about Oregon State's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. And I mean, if you're Oregon State, Ryan, how are you even trying to combat what Notre Dame is going to do defensively?
I talked about this in a matchup article that I think is going to be out today, Vince. Like I think Oregon State wants to shorten this football game. I don't think that they don't want to play the athlete game against Notre Dame. They don't want to play the space game with Notre Dame. I think simply put, they have a really good center in Jake Levingood. Their interior is still pretty much intact outside of the offensive tackles that we've already talked about are not going to play in this football game. But they still have a good running back in the Sean Fenwick. They still have a pretty good interior offensive line. I think that they are going to try to shorten this football game, limit possessions for Notre Dame. It's almost a triple option type of outlook for Oregon State in this sense of like, you want to have time of possession on your side. You want to limit possessions for Notre Dame, even with a couple new guys on the offensive side of football for Notre Dame. You still want to limit possessions. I think they're just going to try to slow this game down and try to shorten this game a little bit with just their offensive approach. I think it's going to be slow, methodical. I think they're going to run the football a ton. I think that's the recipe that they're hoping is going to have some success.
No, I agree. I think that's exactly what we're going to see, and it's not going to be flashy. It's not going to be overly exciting. If you're an Oregon State fan looking for big plays and things like that, I don't think that is going to be the case. And I also think you're going to see some trickeration. I think you're going to see Oregon State kind of come out with some different things to kind of keep Notre Dame on their heels and try to take advantage. And you might see that early on in the game, just like we've seen in the past with teams going up against Notre Dame's defense, trying to throw the kitchen sink at them essentially and keep them guessing. I think you could see that to a degree as well when we're looking at this matchup.
I think the key player for Oregon State is if you're talking about anyone that is going to create some explosive plays and try to get his ball in his hand in space for the times that Oregon State, because you can't just live and die with the run in today's game. Like you can't just do that, right? But I think that the guy that Notre Dame fans need to keep their eye on is Silas Bolden, who is a wide receiver who is listed, Vince, at 5'8", 157 pounds, which tells me he might be 150 pounds, maybe.
And he might be 5'7".
Yes. But 50-something catches, over 700 yards. He also has a punt return for touchdown this year. This kid is their movable chess piece, their guy that you want to get the ball in their hands. So I would not be surprised if we get some screens to Silas, some trying to, maybe some post-snap switches. Maybe, you're just trying to create some easy opportunities in space. If you, jet sweeps, reverses, obviously him as a punt returner, kick returner in the game as well, potentially. They're going to try to get him the ball in space when they are trying to play the space game for the little time that I think they're going to try to do it. But Silas Bolden is definitely the one wide receiver, if you're Notre Dame fans, that you need to kind of keep an eye out for because he's lightning in the bottle, man. If you let him get an open space, he's very quick, he's pretty explosive, and he has the chance to create some big plays if you are not on your P's and Q's.
And his number is what? Do you know off the top of your head?
I just watched film on him. He's a single-digit guy. I think it's number 4. I'm literally number 7.
Okay. I threw you a curveball. I put you on the spot, but so keep an eye out for number 7 when you guys are watching this game offensively for Oregon State. All right, let's flip it over to the other side of the football. We've talked about it a little bit as far as what Oregon State brings to the table defensively, and this is it's kind of a similar situation to Notre Dame. They're going to be missing a couple of pieces to this defense, but this defense is pretty decent. They're 10th in the country in sacks. I remember that part. They can stop the run. They can get after the quarterback. And so with Notre Dame being out 2 tackles, they're going to have to slow down this pass rush for Oregon State, but they are also going to be out 2 defensive backs, and I believe their middle linebacker as well.
Calvin Hart. Yeah.
So
not Calvin Hart. The other kid that transferred. My apologies. Yep.
So that'll be an interesting dynamic for Notre Dame's inexperienced offense to go up against Oregon State's pretty intact defense at this point.
Yeah, it's a very good defense overall. I think 34th in college football in points per game allowed, 21.3, and that's in a Pac-12 this year that had a lot of good offenses. Washington, Oregon, and those cats. Even Washington State was a little bit inconsistent, but they could score some points with the best of them in some games. Number 15 in college football in rushing yards allowed. They only let up 104 yards per game on the ground. So this is a good defense, Vince. I think you mentioned it perfectly. They are mostly intact. They lost, obviously, their best linebacker, the most productive linebacker. They lost their one safety who entered the portal, who's a good player, Achille Arnold. They lost their one starting outside corner that transferred as well. So they're down a couple guys, but it's similar to the Notre Dame defense in like, yeah, you might be down Cam Hartz and Maris Loifow, for instance, but mostly you're intact here, right? Like you still have your guys intact to be able to, kind of counter the losses that you have at the position. So Oregon State is a staunch defense, folks. I talked about this today in a matchup article that should be out here soon. But the battle, I think, is going to be Notre Dame's offensive line and run game against this front seven, Vince, because they have some guys, man. John McCartan at linebacker is a very outside linebacker in the 3-4. He's a very physical player. He's kind of their versatile player. He'll go back in coverage. He'll rush the passer. He sets the edge well. They got some guys up front in the first two levels that I think can give Notre Dame a little bit of problems. So they have to be ready offensive line-wise. It's going to be a great test for Charles Jagasaw and Tosh Baker, Emil Wagner if he plays. Like, those types of guys, I think it's going to be a really good matchup.
Well, and anytime somebody mentions a 3-4, it immediately makes me think about, what is it going to be like for the center in the offense going up against a 3-4? And we all know Ashton Craig is going to be making, a single-digit start. I think it's his third start of the season. He hasn't had a chance, I believe, to go against a 3-4. And so he's going to have the nose tackle right on his head, and he is going to have to make plays. And so a young center with a nose guard right in your face, right here, right now, can be difficult for a young center. And so I'm interested to see, what happens with Ashton Craig going up against that nose tackle, because it's a lot different when you're a center going up against a nose that's right in your face, as opposed to a guy playing a 1 or playing a 3 where you're helping out. You're in a double team, you're crashing, you're double teaming and climbing, doing all those different things. And now all of a sudden you got a guy right on your head. And so how is Ashton Craig going to deal with that in this 3-4? I think that's a minor matchup to keep an eye on as well.
Because this is a 3-4 defense that's kind of predicated on movement a little bit. Like this isn't like a traditional 3-4 when you're talking. Like I always think back to like the Pittsburgh Steelers of like the 90s and 2000s, right? Where it's like there's no Casey Hampton at nose tackle here, right? Like they're not the biggest defensive line in general across the board. They have like a 6'5", 290 guy. They have a 6'3", 280 something guy, and they have a 6'3", 260 something pound guy. Like that's kind of their front three for the most part. They are a 3-4 that's more predicated on, we're going to slant a little bit. We're going to kind of work gap to gap. They're not as much a two-gap style defensively from a 3-4 perspective. They're trying to create negatives, man. They're trying to create chaos. And I mean, they are also a good sack team. They have 36 sacks on the season. Yeah. They have a pretty good tackle for loss number overall as well. This team is trying to create negatives, Vince. Like I mentioned, John McCartan, like he kind of does a little bit of everything. But they also have Andrew Chatfield, who I believe started his career at Florida, I believe. Like he was a pretty high recruit. He's got 9 sacks on the season. Like he's been kind of their sack artist this year, right? So they're trying to create negatives, man. They are not the biggest front seven of all time, but what they are is that they play very hard. They are well coached and they are quick. They're very quick. So they're going to try to shoot gaps. They're not going to be one of those. There's no Lewis Nix on this team, for instance, right? For Notre Dame fans, you're not going to ask a guy to hold the point of attack, peek, and then play gap to gap here, play 2A gaps. Like you're not going to do that. You're going to ask a guy to control one gap and be able to really shoot with his explosiveness and his quickness. That's what this defense is predicated on. And they give teams problems, man. They really have. I mean, they are really good against the run. They get to the quarterback, 36 sacks in the season. That's not even counting, quarterback hits, quarterback hurries, like that type of situation. This is a team that's predicated on negatives. And I think that, again, Notre Dame in general, Ashton Craig started a couple games now. Billy Schroff has started a couple games now. Pat Coogan's been a full-year starter for Notre Dame. The interior offensive line needs to be ready to play. Yeah. But ultimately, my biggest thing that I'll be watching is that Andrew Chatfield and John McCartan let loose against the young offensive tackles for Notre Dame, or the inexperienced offensive tackles, I should say. Again, Charles Jagasaw, and whether it is Tosh Baker or Emil Wagner mixed in or whatever the formula is at right tackle, you're going to have experience at offensive tackle, and you are playing a couple pretty productive and veteran edge players in this game as well. So that's the matchup I think that worries me most as a Notre Dame fan, is that the offensive line has to be ready to play against the quickness, explosiveness, and activeness of this front front three, I should say. My apologies.
Well, front seven, really. I mean, it's going to be, because the slants and the movement. I mean, these offensive linemen are going to have to be on their toes, and they're going to have to get out of their stance, and they're going to have to move. They can't be slow-footed. And we, in the past, when Notre Dame has had slow-footed offensive linemen, teams like this have given them fits, right?
Yep.
And so that can't be the case. They've got to be quick out of their stance. They got to be able to move. Good veteran offensive lines will take a team like Oregon State and what they want to do, and they will use their momentum against them. They're going to slant hard one way. Take them right there. Seal them out. Do whatever you need to do. But that's what you do. I mean, that's how you combat a quick moving team, or you quick move faster than them and you stalemate them at the line of scrimmage and don't allow them to penetrate. I mean, that's going to be the biggest thing, man. If they're penetrating and getting in the backfield against Notre Dame, it's going to be a potential long day for this offense.
The offensive line, I think it's a great point, Vince, is that for Notre Dame to be successful up front, you need to catch this group. And what I mean by that is you need to catch them in a wrong position, or you need to catch them down the middle of their chest. Like, you working shoulders in this game is not going to be it's not going to be as successful for Notre Dame potentially, because you want to be able to control this defensive line up front, and you need to be able to have good targets. So it's going to come down to the coaching points, obviously, right? Like good angles, good aiming points, that type of thing. But it's also going to come down to play calling for me as well. Like, you need to be able to kind of get these guys in some bad positions and catch them in a slant to the opposite side, catch them in the wrong gap. You need to be able to take advantage of those things a little bit in this game. And I think it's going to be a big key for beating this Oregon State team, I would say.
Well, that's a good point that you make, because, play calling is going to be huge in this game. And sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because you're going to catch, if you catch them into slant and you've called the right play call, it's going to go for a lot of yards, especially if you're handing off to a guy like Jeremiah Love, right? If you catch them if you catch them correctly for you, you're going to bust something big. I mean, because you leave gaps when you slant so hard and you do those different kinds of things. And so if they can get lucky at times, and again, luck is preparation and all of that as well. I mean, it is that, right? It's not just going to be a lucky play call, like where they're just blindly
turnovers plays. Are a lot of luck sometimes, man. They really are. So to your point.
So it's going to be interesting to see that part of it. That's for sure. Yeah.
I'll say this, Vince. If I do have a long and successful journalist career, if I ever write a book, that's going to be the exact title, is Better Lucky Than Good. So yes, we're on the same page there, man.
You're not wrong, man. You are not wrong on that. So if you are Gino Guidugli and the offensive staff, right, because this is going to be a team effort here. It's not going to be just Gino. What kind of offense are you going to saddle, Steve Angeli with to try to move the football against this defense?
Well, I think you need to be able to run the football in this team to kind of loosen them up a little bit. I think that's going to be a key. I also think, Vince, like early on in the game, I'm going to test the physicality of the defensive line in general. I'm going to try to run at them a little bit. So it might be a little bit more outside inside zone to really try to get downhill a little bit more. I mean, with Jeremiah Love's in the game, I might run some outside zone early because I really want him to hit that cutback and be able to just kind of out leverage defenses early on in the football game.
Absolutely.
But I'm going to run right at him, right? Like, I'm going to run right at him. But I think that the key for this part is that eventually Oregon State's going to start guessing right a little bit, and the defense is going to have an adjustment. My question about this Notre Dame run game in general is that you need to have a counter off of what you're doing. So not everything can just be front side run. Does that mean that you have a counter to hit backside? Does it mean that you have a little bit of, zone, a little bit of a cross zone type of look? Like, I don't know exactly what the adjustment is, but Notre Dame's going to need one. Like, this isn't a game like last year. What were we so frustrated with the Tommy Rees-led offense? It was like everything was duo. And there was never a counter to it, right? Like, it was just always the same type of thing. I need to have a little bit of a counter to it, because I think that that's going to put Stephen Angeli into some advantageous situations in the sense of play action should be huge in this game. Move the pocket should be huge in this game. Maybe a little RPO off of that run game action is going to be a huge thing. So I think the offense needs to get the run game going, have counters off of it, and make things easy for Steve Angeli to get kind of the offense moving a little bit. That's kind of like my recipe for success early on.
No, I agree. And when you've got a young quarterback in there, and earlier we were talking about the Oregon State quarterback and how he's kind of a game manager and not going to turn the ball over and things of that nature. It's kind of who Steve Angeli is to me. Now, we haven't seen him in a
especially
complete
in
game
start
action.
one.
Right, exactly. I don't want to put that much
Yeah.
on him, right?
No.
And I think you're going to see more play action in this game, especially if they can get the run game going. I mean, like legit play action that everybody's been calling for so much, right, throughout the season. I think you're going to see a decent amount of that because that's going to allow some of these wide receivers to get open. It's going to allow Steve Angeli bigger windows to throw through. And you know what? Getting Steve on the outside, moving the pocket, kind of using his athleticism to his advantage and to Notre Dame's advantage, I think is going to be a good call here as well.
He throws well on the run too, Vince.
He does.
Like I would move the pocket a little bit. I would run some play actions, maybe a couple different types of boots off of it, like maybe a naked or two. Like I would do that with Steve because Steve might end up being a great quarterback at Notre Dame and might end up being more than a game manager. But in start one,
right?
In start one, every quarterback's a game manager, guys. Like how many quarterbacks come out in their first start ever at a university and you're that guy from day one? Like Andrew Luck was a game manager his first start for Stanford, right?
100%.
Trevor Lawrence was a game manager his first start at Clemson. Nobody was that guy from first start. Nobody. Right. So we can't expect Steve to like just drop back 30 something times and just torch his team. It would be great in theory, but it just doesn't typically happen. He's going to be a little bit of a game manager in this first game. It's going to be predicated off of, can you run the football effectively? Can you move the line of scrimmage in your favor offensively? That's what's going to dictate if Notre Dame's able to, one, win, and two, able to win by a good margin, hopefully.
Right.
In this game.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I still like Notre Dame in this game. I think they are going to figure some things out offensively against this Oregon State defense, but those are the matchups, right? It's Notre Dame's offense against Oregon State's pretty intact defense, and then vice versa with Oregon State's, kind of a new look offense versus Notre Dame's intact defense. I mean, and that's why, points could potentially be at a premium here. You don't want to turn the ball over. You want to be able to possess the ball. I think both teams, honestly, if you're going to truth serum both head coaches in this game, they both want to shorten the game. I mean, I don't think that either coach is looking for an 80-yard two-play drive. They'll take it, obviously, because points are at a premium, but like both teams want to shorten this game up. And if we've learned anything about Marcus Freeman, that's exactly what he wants to do. Now, give an offseason to Mike Denbrock to, kind of coax that out of him a little bit. I think that happens, but I don't think we're there yet, right? I think this is still going to be a run-first team and a play-action team and, that kind of thing with Steve Angeli.
I was trying to find what the over-under on this game is, man. I was trying. Oh, wait. Is it 41.5 is the total? Is that what I'm looking at?
So low, but I
know.
But still.
Give me the overall that, but not by much.
Oh, man. I don't know. See, I am very bullish on Notre Dame's defense in this game, and I do feel like Oregon State is going to have to contribute to that over-under, and I don't know how much they're going to be able to contribute. That's my only issue. We'll see what happens as we get a little bit closer to the game, but that's going to be. And Joe is saying the spread is 6.5. It's come down from 10.5.
Is it?
And if that is the case, if it is 6.5, I'm taking Notre Dame minus the 6.5.
I'm seeing -6 on one sports book. That's crazy, man. That's crazy.
I'm taking that all day.
Some sports books.
Huh? I'm taking that all day long.
I think I would also take that. I think I would take the over too, man. I think I would take the over.
Okay.
And I'm not 100% sure on that one yet.
All right. Notre Dame's defense could break that spread. Like, I feel like they may score in this game. We'll see what happens, but
let's hope.
So look, that's going to do it, guys, for this edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast, kind of breaking down Oregon State, a first look at the Beavers versus Notre Dame. And since we have a depth chart for Notre Dame, kind of a first look at Notre Dame too, because this is not going to be the Notre Dame that we're used to in this bowl game. And so only a few more days to go, Ryan. It's Tuesday and the game is on Friday. And of course, we will have, keys to the game. We'll have some different breakdowns. Brian's heading down to El Paso. And so I'm sure we'll hear from him before the game starts and all of that. And of course, we will have the post-game show on Friday. And I believe we're going to have a pregame show as well. That is TBD. since Sean Stiers is in Kansas with some family, and he's doing his thing out there. And so we'll see what happens. I think I don't make any promises. I think Brian and I are going to do a pregame show, but we'll see. We'll see how that all comes together. But plenty of coverage.
Plenty of coverage. Brian also wanted me to remind everyone there is updates on the message board. But as of right now, there is an IB get-together down in El Paso on Thursday, December 28th. So the day before the game. So if anybody is in town, they're fully invited. You can find all the details on the message board. If you are not on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com, you should DM Brian and join the meetup. It should be a good time, obviously, for the folks down there.
No doubt. When we had the meetup down at the Fiesta Bowl a couple of years ago, that was a lot, man. We had a blast. I want to say we were watching one of the semifinal games, and we basically had like this whole side of the bar to ourselves. Like, we had a blast. So if anybody's down in El Paso, make sure you take Brian up on that offer, have some fun, and enjoy what El Paso has to offer the night before the game. So should be a lot of fun. So definitely check out the boards, Irish Breakdown, or boards.irishbreakdown.com. Always good stuff over there. And then, of course, irishbreakdown.com. Ryan said I know he's been working on some stories. There's going to be some more stuff up on the board or up on the site here later today as well. So make sure you check that out. And of course, give us a like, give us a subscribe, hit that notification bell, share with your family and friends. And we're just getting started here this week, guys. So make sure you stay locked into Irish Breakdown. We will get you ready for the Sun Bowl on Friday at 2:00 Eastern on CBS. So we don't have to. This is one of the very few bowl games that are not on the ESPN family of networks. So enjoy that CBS call, ladies and gentlemen. I know I will. So for Ryan Roberts, I'm Vince D'Addario, and we will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.